Welcome back to the IU427 garage, everybody. Today, while Mrs. IU427 and myself are off on an adventure, the Gen 2 Coyote is getting dynoed. All right, while we've been gone, I've been in contact with the owner of the Type 65 Coupe, and he's been keeping me updated on exactly what's going on. He actually picked up the engine the Friday before we were due to leave. We left on a Monday morning for our trip, and we're gonna be gone, or have been gone, for about 2 weeks. And the dyno session was due to happen the following Friday. So that's already happened, and talked to the owner this afternoon to get some of the details from him. And while I wasn't surprised, I took for granted that everyone knew that you have to pre-lube a Coyote, meaning you have to put oil in it, force oil into the engine, so that on a first startup, there would be oiling to the oil pump, and the oil pump would then draw oil from the oil pan. I guess this step was missed. I was not the one that assembled the engine. I just put some of the pretty stuff on it afterwards, and some of the ancillary systems that needed to go on to support the rest of the engine. So, you know, we put on the alternator, we put on the intake manifold, the air conditioning compressor, the power steering pump, and all that kind of stuff. And then we started the dressing of the wires so that when the engine was to arrive at the dyno, they would simply have to plug in whatever harness was left and then do a startup, a run in, and then do some dyno tuning on the engine. Therefore, I didn't have any part of building the engine. I didn't put the cams in. I obviously didn't machine the block and stuff like that. That was another person that did that, and I took for granted that they all knew this. There is a happy ending here. No part of the engine was hurt, but when they first went to start the engine, actually, back that up. They cranked the engine with the starter, hoping to see oil pressure. And the starter doesn't turn fast enough on these Coyotes to create enough suction at the oil pump, because the oil pump actually mounts on the front of the engine, to get oil up to the top of the engine. So you basically have to start it to get enough pressure for that oil pump to send oil up to the top of the engine. Now, I've been told that all the proper assembly lube was used when the engine was put together, and that as soon as they fired the engine, they had immediate oil pressure. So we're all good there. The owner of the car did report to me that they had approximately 4, maybe 5 pulls on the dyno. And in the midst of each pull, they did a little bit of tuning. The number that everybody wants, I'm gonna hold back for just a second, but they tuned for that number, and I think that was probably the 3rd or 4th pull that they did on the dyno. And then on the final pull, they actually tuned the engine for drivability, so street manners, stuff like that. Now that's not to say that it won't need some fine tuning once the engine is put in the car and the owner wants to possibly take it back over there and get some chassis dyno work done. But it should be enough for us to get the engine into the car, get it started. It'll roll on and off a trailer for paint, stuff like that. Probably even be able to drive it around the street. So that's kind of where we're at. Let me go ahead and show you the clips that the owner sent me. And keep in mind, some of these clips I've had to rotate for you to view them in a video, and not everyone understands or knows that you always want to shoot your videos in landscape, not in portrait, because it makes it easier to see on a TV screen. But I'll do my best to get the video portions inserted here so they make sense. The first clip is going to be about the discussion of the oil pressure. And so if you listen closely, you'll hear a discussion between the car owner, the dyno guy, and I think the engine builder, the guy who assembled the engine, about the oil pressure issue and how they got past it. Then the second clip will be of one of the dyno pulls, and then I'll come back and I'll report the actual numbers that they were able to see for peak horsepower and peak torque.
Once I know which direction turning the screwdriver is taking it out of that,
yeah. I was looking at that, yeah. If the gap is bigger,
oh, yeah.
the gap is smaller.
Pretty good so far. Yeah, that was one of those, man.
I'm gonna go check the water in the cellar.
I was getting ready to say, God damn it, I should have bought a crate engine.
It's got really good oil pressure, actually.
Yes, the NMR billet oil pump.
I like the style of Borla stacks. I like the leakage mechanism because you can really dial them in.
Yeah, I did a lot of research, and everybody said it's in Glacier or Borla or
Yeah.
it goes home.
Yeah, the last one that I did on one of these, it was a Porsche with an LS in it. You know, I was really pleased with it on how simple it was. You can really fine tune them. Really good oil pressure.
Okay.
This thing's bone stock engine.
Nope.
No, it's got a
No,
camshaft.
it's got a little cam.
It's got the stage 2 comp cams.
Using that
Okay.
900.
When I talked to the owner through text, he was texting me while the dyno was happening. He was a little bit disappointed in the numbers. And I think there's so much information out on the interweb and you know, on certain car forums that everybody thinks that you do a simple cam change and you're going to see these tremendous gains in horsepower and torque, and that's not always the case. It all depends on where you see those numbers in the graph when you do your dyno session. So keep that in mind. And the end number isn't anything more than bragging rights. So the bottom line is that number that you're going to see if you're drag racing or if you're road racing or when you're driving spiritedly on the road, where you're able to feel the difference. Now, granted, this car owner never drove this car with any engine in it before. This is the first engine it'll have. But stock numbers for the Gen 2 Coyote are somewhere around the 410 to 435 horsepower range. I think the torque is somewhere in there too. It's probably in the 390s to maybe the 400s. But what we saw at the dyno was 457 peak horsepower and a flat 400 foot-pounds of torque for the engine. And the owner said he was a little bit disappointed with those numbers. Now, I'm not disappointed. I'm a realist. I know that, you know, a simple intake or a simple cam change is only going to net you, you know, a certain percentage of extra horsepower and torques. So keep that in mind. You know, if you got an older engine in your car, or maybe you're transitioning from EFI to carburetor, and you're changing the cam and changing the springs and the lifters and stuff like that, be realistic about the numbers that you see afterwards. You're gonna notice the difference when you press on the thin pedal on the right. It's that seat of the pants kind of feeling you get when you accelerate. Even a 10 horsepower difference, you'll be able to feel. Especially if you become accustomed to whatever horsepower and torques your engine or your car produces now. What I'm saying is, don't get all caught up in the numbers, because the bottom line is it's just a number. Now, if you have to have a certain number, then by all means, keep spending money, because that's all it costs. More horsepower, more torques, all that, all it takes is more money. Now, if this owner wanted to see a substantial change in the amount of torque and horsepower that this engine created, then he should have gone with some type of forced induction, a blower or a turbo or twin turbos or whatever. But just going to the stacks isn't going to change the horsepower and torque numbers all that much. Same thing with the cams. You know, you might get 10 or 15 horsepower from one change, and you might get 10 or 15 horsepower from the other, to net you a total of about 35 horsepower, which is what we saw. But you're not going to see a 70 horsepower gain with cams and an induction system. It's not going to happen. And if it does, that's the rarity. So what I always tell car owners, and if you rewind the tape and go back to Michael's build, his Mark III, when we sent him off to the dyno, the main thing that I wanted to stress with him is have the tuner tuned for drivability. Because you don't want a car that makes 500 horsepower, but it makes it way. You don't want to just tune for horsepower and torque and then find out that the car has ill manners when you're driving it around town or get it on the freeway. You know, it's just a dog. It won't accelerate until you're up in the 4,000 to 5,000 RPM range. It just doesn't make sense. So always tune for drivability for a street car. Even a car that you're going to do autocross or open track events, tune it for drivability. Those 5 or 6, maybe even 10 horsepower that you may give up, you're going to gain when you're accelerating off the line or accelerating out of the corners, that kind of stuff. So all the big number is bragging rights. And so if that's all you want, you're not going to drive it. Maybe you're just going to drive it to Cars and Coffee, and you're willing to deal with all of the issues that come with tuning for a high horsepower number, then hey, that's great. More power to you. I'd prefer to have something I can drive, and drive a lot, and not worry about it stalling and kicking and bucking and all that other kind of stuff. We should have the engine back here in our shop in 4 or 5 days. I talked with the owner of the car about arranging the pickup. The engine is still at the dyno shop, and they're going to pick it up there, drop it off here at our shop, and then hopefully it won't be too long before we get it in there. I've got one harness to run down the center of the transmission tunnel, and then I've got the bell housing, clutch, and transmission to mount to the back of the engine, and we should be ready to drop this thing in. And so things ought to pick up on this build pretty quickly. After that, we'll be able to start wiring some of the stuff under the hood, behind the dash, the back of the car, stuff like that. So there's your update on the dyno session for the Coupe's engine, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. If you're enjoying the content here, as always, please do the like, the share, the subscribe, all that kind of stuff. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.